Hey, welcome back to my studio. Today I'm going to be sharing a Tuesday tip. Today's tip is over art. Let's get right in it.
It's funny how what's right here is almost darker than it is what's back here. So you'd build up a lot of shadows right here as you're lightening up as you go back. I want you to take notice of the grass because I think we think too hard about making every individual blade of grass when what you really need to do is start building up your shadows by starting with your darkest colors. And then the sun is shining really well right now. There's what looks like, if you look really closely, they just seem like bits of white almost, but you very rarely just see a pure white in something. This would be a very light tint of a very light green. As you're mixing it, you're probably going to think it's wrong, honestly, because it almost has a turquoisey look to it. But if you trust the process, and I can show you how to do that, then we can get these colors that you're seeing, and it'll make sense on your painting. I love observing this grass because you don't just have grass, you have weeds. And in a very natural landscape that hasn't been pruned to not have those weeds, this is so natural. And all the yellow over there, what you would do is just get it's right over here. Sorry. You would just get a bristle brush, so it's not smooth, so you're not smoothly wiping on your color, you're dabbing it. Hey, I'm going to try to make this as quickly as possible so that you don't get eyesore from the weird light flashes that happen when you record a screen. Now I've got these images pulled up on my laptop. So from a distance, that's what this looks like, right? But what we see when we get closer, these white tips, those are the parts that are kind of dying off. Now this is a lawn that's been mowed, so all of this, these dead pieces, we see that it's kind of brown, right? Got kind of a grayish brown to it. From a distance, you see more of this than you're seeing the green, because there's a higher concentration of the mowed, dried off bits over here. Whenever you're painting a scene where you've got different color variations, because I've got a couple different types of grass here, but then this is also mowed down. Don't worry, I have other examples too. Now that was mowed down grass. This is grass that's much taller, right up near some woods. Now in the woods, it's pretty natural to see felled limbs and trees. And you can see how the light is peeking through. So you can tell without seeing the sun that there is sun shining through the trees. And we know that because it's not something we necessarily think of. We just automatically know because we see these little lit up spots. Whereas this is obviously more shaded. Would take mixing a slightly different color than what you've got here. Now you would start off with your darkest shades and you would build up these grasses. So you'd probably start with a pretty basic green, and then you would paint these strips of grass as they go. And there's some weeds. To be realistic, whenever you're painting a woodsy scene with a lot of grass, is to make sure that you can see that there's a light source coming through. It's very natural to see dead bits of stuff and felled limbs and trees. And you're also going to get different types of things growing. You get some variation with a bush kind of right here. You can kind of see some trees in the background. And we know these are trees even though we don't see the entire tree. That's the beautiful thing about our brains, is that sometimes you only have to see a little bit of the image for our brain to understand what is right there. So whenever you are painting something, don't be too worried about what is not going to show up. So say this is the edge of your canvas right here, and you've got this much room to paint. And then you don't extend your tree all the way up and paint the branches and stuff. It's okay. They will know that that's a tree just by putting some grayish bark right there. And then, so starting with your first layer, you'd be covering most of this in just a green wash, a dark green wash. And then you would add these, you would add these strips of gray. And then you would add the detail by adding the light parts. I think sometimes beginners start with what's lightest, and then they're like, oh, well, this is a shadow, I need to put in the shadow. When really you can start off using a wash of a darker color, and as you're adding the lightest bits, the shadows naturally happen. See, here we have some clovers, some flowers, and probably about 2 different types of grass here, and some weeds. And you can see where the light is going to be coming through the clouds, because we've got a lighter bit right here and right here. What I'm trying to do is help you learn how to analyze what you're looking at, so that whenever you are observing nature or whatever scene that you are about to paint, or even a person, pay attention to where your light source is coming from. Because again, we don't see the sun, but we can see where the sun is affecting our picture. We've got a little bit right here where the sun is coming through, right over here and right here. This picture is a great example of trees, grass, rocks, and a sky. If you notice, you know that these are all trees back here, even without seeing a lot of detail. And you can probably surmise also that there is a flat bit up here, but then it comes down this way. So if you were going to paint this, what you would do is almost create a ridge right here where you have your paints, where you add little bits of trees, and you can see that there's just a little, it's not perfect. It's not like they're big loops and these bumps, you understand, are trees. There's tiny little variations where that tree is coming up that way, and there's some branches coming out that way. You can have fun with it. They're not perfect. They're kind of jaggedy right there. So our angle, our focal point would probably be about right here. And right here, you would work outwards. So you've got you've got lines coming this way. Then you've got this right here, this pole that is creating a line going up. And then you've got a line coming this way because of the tree line here. And you also have a line coming about this way because this is the flat bit of where you have your rocks and your grass. Now the rocks here, there's also another line this way, you can see. Dark spot right here. So if you were going to do a whitewash, if you were going to do a color wash, you would start with some color blocking. You would add a lot of green right around here. You would do blues right here, and you would do a really, really dark, maybe raw umber right here. And again, just like grass, how you would build up that lighter colors is by starting with your darks and slowly add that lighting with a brush. Is that you would get some paint on your brush and you would just kind of make some lines that showcase you are outlining something. And then you'd go back in with another color and you would dab some other shades. If it lets me zoom in, yeah, there we go. You would have some slate gray right here. Right there, there's some more. So you would definitely mix up a slate gray. You see how, let me fixate on this part right here. How it's got that kind of loopy bumps right there. Really all that it takes. You don't have to be too precious with it. You don't have to worry about making rocks look symmetrical. You would just go in with your paint and just... Now, a beginner tip on how to practice this is to get some tracing paper, put it over this, and trace those hard lines that you see, whatever comes through. Now, zooming back out here. If you couldn't tell, there are some really, really light brown. This is what I want to help teach you, is train your eye to see all these different colors. You've got a lot of dark right here, but it wouldn't be black. Because even this darkest spot right here, I would do a raw umber. You could do black, but black, you'd have to make sure that you've got plenty of variation shades, because right here where it looks black, you see that it does get lighter and lighter until the lightest part right here. If you just put black down and then put white, it's not gonna look quite right. You have to make sure that you've got those different hues varying between your darkest color and your lightest color. That's gonna help your realism. So you've got some tans in places. Can you see where I'm pointing these tan spots out? Got tans. And then you've got your slate, your dark slates right here, right here. And then you've got your even lighter slates right there, over here. And then your darkest spots. Coming back to the grass, there's obviously a really tall bush here and shorter bits. So working in layers, what you're going to do, because if you paint this really perfect and you got this right, but you didn't paint what's over here, you would have to go in between your lines, and that's just so much harder and very painstaking. So after you have put your color down for your color blocking, start in the back, the background, and just add your colors. And see, there's, let me zoom in here. You can see there is a slight color variation right here. You see that? You would just shade that with a darker green. A pro tip is shading less with black and shading with darker hues of your colors. Or depending on what you're painting, other colors as well. Bring the color darker and deeper. And you would just get your brush and just, I wouldn't use that brush for it actually. I would get a bigger brush like this, and I would just, these spots, dab here. So not full put on like that. What I would do is get the edge of your brush and dab these darker spots. I want you to pay attention. I want you to notice where these darker spots are. So there's darker spots right here, right there. So literally all you're doing is getting your darker color and just doing a little bit right where they're at. and then you build it up by adding the lighter colors on top of it. And that's how you work in your layers, where you can see these. So as you're brushing and you're making your brush strokes, you see how there's almost like a line here. Can you see that line? So when you're brushing, you would stop right about there instead of going all the way up and going like, that's how you're able to create those lines in your nature paintings. I'll show you how to do that with actual paints. I'm trying to help teach you how to analyze what you're looking at before you start painting, because that is going to help you a lot. Hey, I want to take a second to invite you to subscribe to my channel. If you like tips about art and writing, I do them every week. Don't forget to hit that notification icon so that you do not miss an episode. Okay, let's get back. If I was going to be mixing all of my greens by hand, these are the colors that I would be using to do that. This is a really deep opaque blue with a pretty opaque yellow. This is what I would use to shade with, and this is what I would use to tint with. Remember, tinting is when you're adding a lighter color or a white. Shading is with a darker color. Now, Golden does make some greens. They do have some prefabricated colors for you that are really helpful. And if you wanted something even easier, Arteza, the set that I got, has a ton of greens for you. Different shades, different hues, and I would use a few of these and tint with these yellow ones and shade with this raw umber here. Obviously, I don't shy away from using these prefabricated greens. They're great and super simple, and they cut down your mixing time when you don't have to do them by hand, starting with your primary colors. You do what you want, you do what you can. Don't worry about trying to match what I have identically, and don't feel bad if you don't have the same tools that any artist has. And these are not rules, these are just tips for you. For the sake of explaining some color theory, I am going to be mixing some greens for you. I'm going to get a really healthy dollop of this primary cayenne right here, or cyan. Some cadmium yellow. I do want to take a second to point out the fact that the shades that you can make of green are vast, because it takes yellow and blue to make a green, but there's so many different types of yellows, there's so many different types of blues. And just to demonstrate that, I've already put down this cyan. I am also going to use a little bit of ultramarine blue to demonstrate. There's a really dark, rich blue. And then not only can you mix these together and get a different color between these two and these two, but depending on how much blue you add and how much yellow you add, changes it again into a different hue from that same color. And then not to mention adding a shader or a tinter. So I'm going to try to get about the same amount each. I have been measuring for a long time, so I can eyeball it really easily. That is a really nice green. Look at that. The one on the left, where I used the cyan blue and the cadmium yellow, is a foresty green. The ultramarine and the cadmium yellow make an olive. Are you surprised about the hue of the color? Or are you someone that's pretty good at guessing what the color's gonna look like when it's mixed? Which one did you think was gonna be darker? Now, to take it a step further, I'm gonna take some of this. Just the tiniest bit. We can always add, but we can't take away. Making sure I'm getting off all of the color that I can, because it hurts me to kind of wipe off these colors. It feels wasteful, even though it's not very much that I'm wiping down on my, or wiping off on my napkin. Can you see the difference? Just a tiny bit of white. Well, let's do it over here as well. Having these different shades is going to give your picture more richness. Now I'm going to take it another step, and I'm going to now shade this bit that's been lightened. Beautiful. Now I'm going to take it another step, and I'm going to shade with the original mixed color. Look at that. Can you tell the difference between all of these? These two are probably the closest in color. This one was tinted first before it was shaded, but even that has a place in your painting. Whenever you shade a color first, you're making a whole new color. A lot of times the word hue is used, I think, to help differentiate with the vocabulary of these are different colors, right? But they are one color. with different hues, different values. Now I'm going to do the same over here. Now I want these to have a really good lifespan while I'm working with them. So I am going to quickly add some retarder to each one, which is going to slow. Retard means to slow. So a medium retarder is slowing down the drying time. That's going to give us more time to work. The less color you have, the quicker it dries out. One of the reasons why I love using glass is it keeps your paints from drying out. If you were to use something that was porous, the air would be going through the pores of whatever you were using. If you were using like a paper plate or even some plastics, would suck the air out of your paints and dry them. I would recommend mixing your colors before you paint. That way when you get started painting, all you have to do is just do the painting. Now if you run out of color, you'll have to mix more. And a pro tip, make a swatch of all of these so that when you have to mix more, you have the swatch to color match. Because yeah, you'll have the color here, you see there's bits of color there, but having a solid piece strip that you can compare is a little bit easier than having it right here, because as you're mixing you might accidentally scrape this off and then you've lost the color you're trying to mix it to. Okay, just added some longevity to that so we have more time to work with those than we would have if we didn't do that. I've grabbed a bit of paper here. Being really careful not to mix those colors, but I'm trying to utilize both sides before I clean them off. there we have it. Now we still have plenty of paint to go back and mix with should we need to. But here's our swatch of our 8 colors that we just made. Anyone see any similarities? Seeing a little bit of these ones are pretty close to those. All right, let's get started painting. Now, one of the tips I gave you was starting with some back color here. Another shade, hue. Notice how I'm pulling the color up instead of starting here and going down. Now, real grass goes in different directions. So we're going to build up the color here like what we've seen. In our reference photos. I apologize, you'll have to forgive me for not turning my light on. Now you can probably see what I'm doing a lot better. But grass goes in lots of different directions. So don't be afraid to do something goofy and even go side like that. Off to the side. Because grass does that. So you definitely build up. And this would just be one spot. And you would just do that and repeat it to build up a larger scene. You can do big, chunky grass. You can even get a bigger brush like that and just that I kind of demonstrate doing layers a little bit. And not just layers where I had the darker color first and then put the lighter color on. I'm talking about layers like this. Layers. So if you were painting a landscape and this was the edge of your painting right here, and this is the grass that was closest to you, you wouldn't paint this first and then this and then that. You would start in the back, like how I showed on that picture earlier, and work your way up. And you can kind of see, if the camera is picking it up, how you can tell those colors where there's the darker. Remember how we saw that on our picture? Slight color variation right here. You see that? Almost like a line here. Can you see that line? Well, we just did that without having to go in and be like, okay, this part's darker, this part's darker. Let me show another example of that. Say this is going to be darker over here. We've got some darker spots over here. We want that to be darker. Going in with a lighter. Just getting that color down. I'm going to add a darker over here. Darker over there. Do you see how I'm having these spots that are darker mixed in? Now you can choose what brush you want to go in with. We've been using this one, but it's getting a little wet. So I'm trying to dry it a little bit so that I keep it separate like this. Because when it truly is dry, it looks more like that. And that, I want it to stay separate. I don't want it to be smooth, like that kind of smooth. So we've already got our darker spots. Now I'm going to use the same color everywhere, but I'm going to show you how to make these layers on this color blocked out spot that we have. I ran out of the paint I was going to use, so I had to mix some more. How do you think I did? I think I did pretty good. I think it needs a little bit more yellow, maybe a tiny bit more, but you know what? It's so close. I'm gonna leave it. So I scooped up some on my palette knife so that I don't have to reach so far from my color. Start in the back here. And this being so open in spots is what helps create the different blades of grass. See, I'm just building it. I don't want to push too hard because if I push it's going to smash that color down, and it's not going to make the blades of grass that I'm wanting. I'm just going to have a smushed bit of color. So you can see in real time how that works. How we just did our layers with our foreground and our background, playing with the different color blocking. So you see these different darker spots. So I didn't have to go in with a darker and be like, oh, well, I need the shading here. We did it by putting the darker color. So you can see there's almost a line right here and right here where you see kind of how we saw in our picture reference. Oh, sometimes in grass naturally there's just these lines of different spots of grass. Maybe they only grow so high, but because we're not looking at it aerially, if we were in the air and we were looking at it aerially, we would see it all the same, right? But because our focus is turned and we are looking at it, we get to see the depth of how tall the grass is. And so if the grass is only going to grow so high, as we're looking at it from a distance, we're going to see, well, this bit right here is just this high, and so is that, and so is that. And that's how you end up with those lines in nature. Again, I just want to help teach you how to analyze what you're looking at, because the more you understand what you're looking at, the easier and the more it makes sense on how to paint what you're painting. And don't forget to have fun with it and play with colors. Well, that's it. That's all I have for you. Again, there are so many different variations. I am certainly not exhausting all of the different options. I would encourage you to have fun and play with it. I really hope this encouraged you to get going and get trying it. And I also hope that this demystified grass for you a little bit and explaining why things look the way that they do. But I hope that you apply those in other areas of painting as well. All right. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you stopping by my studio. Comment below what you hope to see me do in the future. All right. Bye. Editing Tuesday here. I apologize in advance for what you're about to see. Just remember, I'm a little quirky and I like to have fun when I make videos and content. Oh, crikey! Look at this grass! Let me just get on in there. Look how tall it is. Oh, crikey! Look at that grass! Look at how dead it is! Look at how dead it is! Crikey, look at that grass! Beautiful. Crikey, look at that beautiful grass. Crikey, look at that grass. Excuse me, sir, I'm trying to shoot a video. My humblest apologies for shouting at you, mister and ma'ams, but I do declare I need you to be a little bit quieter. Hush it, you crow!